Guys and girls, glute training, really popular topic. A lot of guys think, oh, there's no point me training the glutes, what's the point? Women love training the glutes. Now, we work with everybody from day-to-day people right through to physique competitors and people that do photo shoots. And day-to-day people don't necessarily see the value in training glutes until we go through the benefits of them, because structurally, for spinal health and for day-to-day function, they're essential. But not only that, when you actually get to training the glutes, you're able to progress in your training in the gym. So you can do things like deadlifts and squats and all the stuff that's metabolically a lot more challenging. When stuff's metabolically more challenging, you're gonna get leaner. Things are gonna improve in the gym, and you're gonna improve the exercise pool that you've got to choose from. The second thing you've got to think about with the glutes is from an aesthetic perspective when it comes to physiques, because a lot of people have a limitation in glute development laterally, and especially like say the glute max area, and that's because they're not targeting them when they do things like the squat, and they'll normally feel the lower back, or they do other exercises such as lunges or split squats, and they still won't feel the glutes. But in order to be able to train them, you need to be able to assess them and find out if they're weak, and whether or not you need to be doing certain stuff to actually bring them up to par with other things like the hamstrings and the quads. So I'm sat on the Watson's hip extension machine. Best thing about this, racks for the bars, comfortable back support, variable distance depending on your own biomechanics. And this little clever bit here is we have a slant, okay, an angle for your feet. Now, most people when they do glute bridges will find that they feel like their feet are slipping away from them. So what they do naturally is they pull their feet back, and that initiates the hamstrings. So when they're doing glute bridges, they feel less of the glutes and more of the hamstrings. With this, it's perfect because the angle stops you feeling like you're sliding away, therefore you can actually relax your hamstrings and just train the glutes. And what we do with this exercise is we teach people how to contract and recruit the glutes. Now, the biggest problem with most people, as I've gone through with all the other videos that I've done recently on YouTube, is most people can't train their muscles, which are weak, which are underdeveloped, at the extremities. So that's the lengthened position of a muscle, right through to the fully shortened position. And unless you've got a full contraction, unless you can keep tension on a muscle throughout a full set, that muscle is going to be weak, and it's going to be the one that gives in most in compound exercises such as deadlifts, squats, and you name it. So we got to go through a little bit of glute 101. So let me stand up for a second and just explain what the Glute Max Glute Me do. So we've got a stretched or lengthened range, and then we've got a shortened range. Now, contrary to popular belief, when people do all this and reach back, this actually isn't getting the glute any shorter, it's just you're extending through the lumbar. So lengthened position of the glute through to a contracted position, and it's not a lot further than there. Now, the glute med abducts the hip as well, and then collectively we have an external rotation of the hip joint, the femur, which gets the glute fully shortened. So we've got, that is a fully shortened glute. Now, in doing that, what we've got to therefore realize is that abduction, extension, and external rotation of the hip joint are key movements or foot placement positions that we need to use when we're training the glutes. And a lot of people literally just do this, but they don't take into consideration changing foot angles, which abducts the hip. They don't think about external rotation, which doesn't allow the glute to get fully shortened. You will 9 times out of 10 struggle to develop a muscle at the extremities and where you're weakest. And for most people, learning how to control the muscles in the shortened range is what you need to do first. So what we tend to do with people is we get in the Watson's hip extension machine, and we just teach people from this lengthened position here, okay? So remember, the hip position, okay? This lengthened position that we've got here will actually come right up to here. So that's your lengthened range. Remember, you've got the full hip flexion, which you'll get when you squat, is going to be that lengthened range. So when I'm in this position here, that's your lengthened range, okay? Now, there's no loading, but there is my body weight loading on me. And then at this point here, what I do, I don't push my knees forward and I don't reach back. All I'm gonna do is extend my hips. So, without moving anything of my lumbar, I'm going to contract my glutes by pinching them in at the top, at the top, at the top. Now, what I want is a little squeeze under, which gets my glutes fully shortened at the top. So I take them lengthened, pinch inwards with the fibers, running along, up to the top, and then a little squeeze under. Now, what that does initially, for most people when they do this exercise, when they get to the top, you'll find that they're shaking a lot. And this is funny because you see a lot of people do 20, 60, 80, 100 kgs on the barbell hip extension. But what's happening, if you think about it, is they're literally just throwing the bar up. Are they actually contracting the glutes? Now, some people are very, very strong, and yes, they can contract the glutes. But we train people on a day-to-day basis for physique development, and we watch this over and over again. People can't contract the glutes properly. So in order to train the glutes, you need to make sure you can initiate, contract, squeeze, before you even put the extra load on, because you want to make sure tension's there. So when I do get to put a barbell on, and I contract and squeeze up, when I get to the top, the glutes are fully on and they're fully working. So if you get somebody into that top fully contracted position and they're shaking, hey presto, that person is weak at the fully shortened range of the the glutes and needs to train there. The next step for us is to just apply a little bit of load, so you don't have to use the full band, and you can put the band around the hips. Again, this time, slightly externally rotating the feet, heels in slightly, because now we've got that external rotation coming on more. And then all we're gonna do from here is squeeze up, and then I get to the point where I'm weak, the band isn't too heavy, and then I squeeze under, and I contract the glutes as hard as I can. And if you've got somebody shaking in that position, they're gonna be very, very weak and they need to train there. Now, I watch a lot of people just coming in, and sometimes even here, and I have to correct them a little bit. The goal isn't to continually come in and just do banded, or body weight. The goal is to move up in load, as it is with everything that we do, but load whilst tension and load whilst contracting, and then you can explode, because once you've learned to maintain tension, it becomes a very subconscious movement, and you can literally contract and the glutes will develop once you start to put a load through them. If you're just squeezing and contracting, just like anything, in the foundations you'll develop a little bit, but you do need load at those extremities to be able to develop any further. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to just move over to the cables, show you a little bit of a variation on the cables, just so that you can learn some tips to initiate. Then I'm going to take you over and just look at the squat movement pattern on the V squat, and just show you how you can really start to then load the glutes up. So guys, the next step, you've done some initiation, you've done some firing, you've found out where you're weak. Whether you're male or female, it's still important to get your glutes activated if they're very, very weak. Now, modified this a little bit, because a lot of people will literally just stand in front of the cables and just do this. But you've got to remember, part of what the hamstrings do is extend the hip. So if you're not actually consciously squeezing the glutes, you could literally just be ploughing the hamstrings backwards and forwards and extending through your lumbar. So when you see all this going on in the gym, very little glutes really being trained. So one thing you've got to do with the glutes is, I like to put a little bit of abduction in, so that's moving it away. I then like to do the extension, which is to about here, whilst getting some level of external rotation, which is here. Now you can see my foot's pointed out there. So I come in, I have the bit of abduction, I have the extension, no lumbar extension, and then I do the slight external rotation. So I'm going to do it all as one movement. I start abducted, externally rotate whilst extending. Stay abducted, extend, externally rotated. Now I'm using this exercise to get into a shortened and a contracted position. Why? Because it's amazing for firing up the glutes. Is this a mass builder? No. Is it great for females that aren't particularly strong? Yes. What are the limitations? The stabilizer is going to be the left hip. So as you're doing this, some people will lean across. So what I've done in the past is, even by changing the angle of this, if you can get something such as a pad that's this sort of distance, or get someone to stand in between you so you can push against them, it creates that artificial stability here and gives you something to lock into. Because as you get tired, guess what happens? You lean away from the load to make the exercise easier. So just remember, these two exercises are kind of like getting the glutes fired, finding out where you're weak, training them, contracting them in the shortened range. The barbell hip extension, or the hip extension, that's when you can really start to add some load as well onto the bar once you've got everything firing and working. So remember your anatomy, remember joints and biomechanics, and these are the sort of things that play a big pivotal part in improving your glutes. Now I'm going to take you over to the V squat and show you how you can really start to add the load, which once your actual glutes work, then you're going to build bigger glutes, trust me. We've gone through a couple of the initiations, the loadings. As I said, barbell hip extension, once you've done the hip extension, get adding load. However, next step, I love the V squat. Now, if you can't do the V squat, you could, if your timing's right, progress onto a back squat. Why do I like the V squat? The angle fires everything towards my glutes. I'm very locked in with it being a machine. Less stability things for me to worry about. So I'll show you how the V squat works. I've banded the V squat because the mechanics of the machine mean that the loading is placed at the bottom where my glutes are going to be under load. Then at the top, the load drops off quite quickly. So I want to make sure there's a little bit of load as the exercise is coming towards the top so I can maintain tension on my glutes. The setup of this and the angle of force places it straight down my back towards my glutes so I can contract and then extend my hips through. Putting a loading on this, there's not a lot on it at the minute, but trust me, when I get loaded this up, your glutes feel pumped by the end of it. So what we'll do, if you've not got one of these in your gym, go and have a drive around and see if you can find one, because unbelievable to build your glutes. So what we're going to do, get in, sit back, glutes are loaded, squeeze through, okay? Glutes are loaded, and now squeeze the glutes through, don't lock out. Glutes are loaded, squeeze through. So you can see where the loading was coming down through my glutes. Phenomenal exercise. The other good thing about this is you can move your foot positions if biomechanically you have longer femurs, shorter tibias, because don't forget, a lot of the problems with people when they try and squat is inherently that they've got proportional, not issues, but not necessarily designed to squat perfectly unless you understand how to change all your feet positions, which again, and use heel wedges and stuff, which is a video for another day. But using the V squat is one of the best exercises to really get the glutes targeted, and great to add in after you've done all the foundational glute stuff. So I'll put a squat video together in the next series that I do, but for the time being, give this glute stuff a go, see how much more contraction you get, and then start to get strong, and they'll grow.